Now it's my great honor to announce and bring to the stage our diversity panel. Moderating the panel is James Howard. James is the Executive Director of the Black Inventors Hall of Fame. And welcome. Next up is Norma Alcantar. She is professor in the Department of Chemical Engineering and Biomedical Engineering at the University of South Florida. Norma. And finally, it's my distinct honor to welcome to the stage Cato Laurencin, who is the university professor and Albert and Wilda Van Dusen Distinguished Endowed Professor at the University of Connecticut. Thank you all.
Thank you. Okay. Testing, 1, 2, 3. Welcome everyone, I'm James Howard, Executive Director of the Black Inventors Hall of Fame. We're gonna bring to you a lively discussion today on diversity and inclusion as it relates to invention. I have the pleasure of sharing the stage today with two distinguished guests. We have Dr. Norma Alcantar, and she's gonna bring a presentation to you on leveling the playing field for women in the fields of innovation and entrepreneurship. And then to the left of Dr. Alcantar, we have Dr. Cato Laurencin. And he's going to bring to you a lively discussion on the fact that innovation and invention has a tradition within the Black history. So let us get underway.
I beg your pardon. I forgot we have somebody joining us virtually. Yes. My bad. Ming Hsieh is joining us virtually. I'm sorry.
That's okay. And he's right. And we also have Dr. Ming Hsieh will be joining us virtually, and we're going to turn the mic over to Dr. Ming right now.
Yeah, good morning. And sorry, I could not join the events live in person today because I have a board meeting. But congratulations, everyone, for your participation for this event live. And really, I'm very sorry to miss the gala tonight, and hopefully everybody have enjoy your life, enjoy your time there.
Okay. And Dr. Ming, you want to open us up right now and speak from your perspective on the importance of diversity and inclusion within this space?
I think that definitely it is very important as we are rebuild our economy, bring up the diversity and inclusion. It is a very, very important topic. A lot of minority has been disadvantaged in terms of competing in the major business in this environment.
Excellent. That's a very excellent point. And it's interesting that from the perspective even of virtual, we can get a good sense of the role that diversity can play, because no longer are we imperiled by the inability to perhaps travel somewhere or something like that. Pretty much everyone can now take stock in this process. Dr. Alcantar, I had a conversation with you a little earlier about your talking points, and I found it very intriguing, your focus on the role of women in this space. You want to speak to us, what you?
Yes, of course. So this is evidence that was taken from about 1,800 different companies, about 40 case studies on how women entrepreneurship and diversity innovation, how can that enhance being in the space of entrepreneurship. So they divide entrepreneurship or innovation in two different domains, one that is inherit and one that is acquire, right? So inherit, when you have a trade for innovation, and acquire when you have work on innovation and you learn and you actually apply what you have learned into the space. But so the good news is they actually show that if you have diversity and if you include women and LGBT community people in your company, you will have actually a higher gain because your company will have a higher audience. So in the country, it has been recognized that cultural differences actually bring up consumers that will be female background. They will have the attractiveness that they feel that they would like to buy that product that you are offering because you have those little details that were given by the diversity of your workforce. Also, another part of the opportunities that we've seen is really for those companies, they out-innovate and they outperform others, and it's 45% likelier that they will be in a higher market, right? That they will have a higher, they will share a higher market price as a company overall. And also 70% likelier to report that the firm capture a new market every day. So those are the good news. The bad news is that usually 20% higher opportunities will go to white males instead of women. And from that, we also know that people of color will be 24 less likely, LGBTs will be 25% less likely to have opportunities in leadership. And so that's concerning, right? Why is that happening? We need to open up and have an understanding of how clients' diversity can actually enhance entrepreneurship and the innovation that we seek to have in the country and around the globe. So just to close my remarks, I just would like to say that usually clients' ethnicity is viewed in a team has 152% higher understanding of what the market is for that diverse group. So they will have a higher understanding of how to get to the different markets than having a group, a team that is working for your company that is not diverse. And behaviors that we can change in companies will be ensuring that your employees are heard, that you'll make a safe environment for new ideas, giving the team members a decision-making authority, sharing the credit for success with your team, and giving also actionable feedback, which will implement a friendship and really a closeness within your team or your company. So that's
Yeah, promoting closeness, that's very, very important. Dr. Laurencin, the issues of diversity and inclusion within the innovation space is something that's very near and dear to you. And I understand you have a particular message in that regard for us, including also a presentation later on.
Yeah, well, thank you. So, looking at the theme of this meeting, is look back, think forward, and framing the future of innovation, which I think is a great theme for the meeting. If we do look back in terms of innovation and this country, Black people have had a central role in innovation in this country. And in fact, if you look at the turn of the century, 100 years ago, I would suggest that the greatest inventors in America were Black at the turn of the century. first of all, their stories are incredible. I mean, if you've got, I just think about Lewis Latimer as an individual who parents, born enslaved and escaped to the north, to Massachusetts. Then went, he was born in the 1840s. Then someone actually saw his parents and of course tried to bring them back to the South. And he had to be defended by, his family was defended by Frederick Douglass in a very famous case in Massachusetts in which he was allowed to stay, but still they had to keep moving around. In that backdrop, after the Civil War, he was able to really flourish as an inventor. And probably, things around us right now, like, the telephone and light, probably wouldn't be the same way they are without Lewis Latimer. But he's probably, how many people have heard of Lewis Latimer? One person, two, someone sheepishly said the third person in the back, but this guy does know because he said it immediately, showed immediately. But only about 3 out of maybe 100 people in the room have heard of Lewis Latimer. But he worked with Bell because Bell was having trouble putting his ideas down to paper in terms of being able to get the patents going, and so he helped Bell make sure that he had his patents drafted and set up. And then when he was done, he said, "Okay, I'm done with the whole phone thing. Thank you." And he moved over to work to help Edison. And we think about Thomas Edison as inventing the light bulb. Yeah, but he invented a light bulb that worked for like 10 seconds. So the filament that he had on the light bulb, it just came and went. And unless you were needed for Halloween, it wasn't really going to be something that's going to be very productive for you. And so Lewis Latimer was the person who decided we should make this from a carbon filament. And if we make it with a carbon filament, we'll be able to utilize something that's actually going to work. And of course, he patented the carbon filament for light bulbs, which was and then licensed to an electric company called the General Electric Company, and the rest is history in terms of why we have lighting now. He was also the first person who actually had the concept of an electrified city, and how do you create a city that's electrified, and wrote the first book on electrification, on widespread electrification, how that would take place and how that take place in the city, which is the basis behind how cities are electrified today. Just one person, just talking about in terms of the turn of the century. And so if we look at that area, this turn of the century, it was an interesting area because we entered this area, the Reconstruction, in which blacks were flourishing in businesses. Blacks were doing well in terms of politics. And then in the late 1800s, we saw the advent of Jim Crow, the Black Codes, and all the things that racism brought in terms of changing the way the world was. And we're still seeing that now. We're still seeing that in terms of America today, in terms of moving forward. So while I believe that when we think about the concept of inclusion and diversity, I'd say inclusion first, because I think that an inclusive environment, you get diversity with that if you're having an inclusive environment. We tend to say diversity and inclusion, but really inclusion comes first, and creating an environment that is inclusive is sort of our main goal. And then diversity comes with it. And equity becomes important, because in order to understand, to make these things happen, you just can't just sort of say, hey, this would be great if it happens. You have to take positive steps in terms of making it happen. I also think that we in America have this peculiar area of racism that's taking place that is really stifling everything that we do. And so in moving forward, when we think about inclusion and diversity, we have to include anti-racism in terms of as a part of it. And then the other part I think is important is that we need to work to learn from each other in terms of, especially in terms of the contribution of racism to our society, in terms of making changes. If we can do that, I think that we can get to this turn of the century, get back to the turn of the century where really there was a real flourishing in terms of inventorship and science among blacks. And I've called this paradigm the ideal path with inclusion, diversity, equity, anti-racism, and learning. And I have a small video that sort of speaks to it. So I'm going to ask if they can roll the video.
Cue it up.
So my belief is that we need to move to inclusion, diversity, equity, anti-racism, and learning. Anti-racism, according to Wikipedia, can be defined as a form of action against racism, systemic racism, and the oppression of marginalized groups. Being anti-racist is based on the conscious efforts and actions to provide equitable opportunities for all people on an individual and systemic level. People can act against racism by acknowledging personal privileges, confronting acts of racial discrimination, and working to change personal racial biases, unquote. By learning, what do I mean? Understanding ways in which Black people are affected by the specific kinds of racial discrimination called anti-Blackness. Understanding the history of Black, Indigenous, and people of color. Moving from just an ally to what I would call a ride or die partner in the anti-racism movement. These are some of the ways that I believe learning can be used in a constructive way to bring about the ideal pathway to move forward. I'm very proud of our university, the University of Connecticut. We have just initiated a U.S. anti-Black racism course. That course, which is now taking place and being offered to all faculty, staff, and students, is a one-credit course on the foundational history and concepts related to systemic and anti-Black racism. It's focused on the foundational concepts related to Black consciousness, Black resistance, Black resilience, and intersectional solidarity. It's particularly focused on the U.S. context. It provides resources at UConn to continue the study, development, understanding, and potentially disrupting anti-Black racism for the collective good. Information on the course is available at the Provost's office and the Provost website at the University of Connecticut. This is the type of learning environment that can promote diversity, equity, and inclusion for all. Addressing anti-racism is key in terms of moving forward as a nation and creating a more equitable environment. So let's move from diversity, inclusion, and equity to inclusion, diversity, equity, anti-racism, and learning. I believe that's the pathway to the future. I want to again give thanks to all for bestowing upon me the Herbert W. Nickens Award. In this lecture, I have outlined my hope and vision for combating racial and ethnic health disparities. I hope to be able to work with individuals across the country in the area of inclusion, diversity, equity, anti-racism, and learning as we put into place an ideal path for achieving a better society. Thank you.
Good job. Great job.
So I'll leave it back. I'll give it back to the panel. But I think that the future, in terms of looking back and looking forward, at least when we talk about Black inventorship and I see this generation of young Black people interested in science, that we have to be in a world that has not just inclusion and diversity, but also anti-racism as a part of it because of our history of our nation. But we know that if we get into these periods of time in which we are combating racism, that people can flourish, and inventorship can flourish, and science can flourish. And so I hope that we can work together in that area. Just parenthetically, I'm on the board of the American Institute of Chemical Engineers. And if you go to the AICHE website, you'll see under diversity that they've adopted the ideal path as a part of their diversity platform. It is their diversity platform, where they've embraced the concept of anti-racism and learning as a part of moving forward, and their programs and their structure are around this. Now, it's just started this year, about 6 months ago, But I'm very optimistic about organizations thinking about this concept of anti-racism as a major import in terms of moving our country forward.
Very good. Commendable program you have there at Connecticut. Absolutely commendable. Dr. Ming Hsieh, I'd like to present a question to you. I see you're the founder of the Fulgent Genetics. Within that high-tech field, what types of measures are being taken to sort of leverage off the discussion that our two panelists up here on the stage are talking about, diversity, inclusion, and so forth? What sort of measures in the high-tech space are being taken that you can share with us?
Sure. Definitely, both Norma and Cato's stress for this in terms of diversity, inclusion, and all those topics involved of innovation, creation. Like in the business world, I think I can give your experience we had during this pandemic period. I think we talk about inclusion. If we extended that topic and become a little bit larger, is globalization. We had to include all the races, all countries, and bring everybody together and building this sustainable world. During this pandemic period, I think that was last January, we learned from WTO website about the virus strains. It's been in China, in Wuhan. There is this virus published sequence series published on the WTO's website. And our scientists in America started trying to notice about this area because we are in the genetic sequencing area. Our primary focuses during that time, before the pandemic, was in the cancer research, rare disease detections. So our scientists tried to build something, try to detect this virus, the changes as a time. So we started working on a detection method, how to detect this virus if it changed based on different timing or the variations. So we created this new method called multiplex PCR method. It's using a next generation sequencing method to be better detect this virus. Our initial goal was to try to see whether we could help the scientists in China to detect these variations as this Wuhan's virus started. Somehow in China, they were able to quickly control the virus. And in America, we started the pandemics. Due to our early creation of this method, we were quickly adopted the method in America. As we build our capacity for the genomic test or the PCR test for during the control of the pandemics, not only we can detect the virus infections, but we also detect the variant of this virus. So in that sense, from a genetic company, we did not have a molecular diagnostic test before. We quickly built the capacity, and now we become one of the top 5 labs provide the COVID testing in the nation. So I think that the innovation and creation, it is played a major role. I think the same thing from our experience, fighting for this pandemic, you need a global effort, and that's also the global response. And definitely it is a collaborative event events and effort, and everybody has to work together. So that's business inclusion. That's what we have experienced.
The collaborative aspect, yes, and you seem to be serving as a role model, and I'd like to put this next question to Dr. Norma Alcantar. Speak to us about the importance of role modeling, particularly as it relates to advancing women in technology and innovation.
Yes, so what I have seen is because women don't have that much opportunity just to get the floor, having women that have that opportunity brings that role model inspiration for the new generations. And not just for women, but for other diversity groups, because what you will see is kind of like breaking little doors, right? Opening little doors. And then by the end, we are hoping that the door will be wide, open for everybody. So having a role model that can give or can have the opportunity to showcase ideas and to bring up to the table the value of being exposed to the culture, exposed to the different ethnicity groups, exposed to global changes happening in, coming from different countries, opening that space. The hope is that will bring up also the new generation for entrepreneurs and innovators.
Excellent. And would you say that role modeling can start at grade school in terms of the influence and so forth? Or
yes, and I have been, in the NAI for now some time in the executive committee for the USF chapter. And we've seen that if you target middle school and high school kids for their innovating ideas, then they actually have a path to go into a STEM, and they have a desire, they have the motivation, they see the opportunity, and we, the NAI USF chapter had before. We have like an annual competition for middle schools and high schools and K to 12 really, and it was so interesting to see the projects that were presented. It was so rich. It was just so amazing to have that experience. Of course, our last event was in 2019. We still saw that motivation and that desire to bring something new, right? I remember one kid, he was 6 years old, and his idea was to get a zip line from the front seat to the back seat so that his mother can send him snacks. So he created the zip line snack road. And it was just so cute that a 6-year-old had these ideas and can bring them to a group of entrepreneurs. And when you see that, this is so neat, right? That he was trying to solve a problem, and he saw that space, and he was safe to present it into the school, and then from the school it went to the competition, and he was one of the winners for that.
That is excellent. A very good example of role modeling. I'd like to share with the audience a real quick one as well, and I'd like to introduce you to Simon. Simon is a young man from the University of Colorado Boulder who took part in my inaugural Design Thinking Collegiate Challenge last year. His collaborative group worked on injustices in math and advanced education for minorities. They did not win the competition, but Simon had come to me and pulled me aside and said that he was a very low-key and very shy individual, and that by my very presence, he was encouraged to, one, take on the competition. And now today, Simon, along with a few other young men from his school, has started up a solar energy company. And if anyone's interested in following Simon's story, just send me an email, and I will send you the YouTube feature article that was just done on Simon and his solar company. So just that small bit of influence of seeing that someone of my persuasion is running a nonprofit to highlight and immortalize the ingenious of African-American inventors, to someone who's emboldened enough to step forward, participate in a design collegiate challenge, and then step forward even further to start his own company. So we have an example right there, role modeling. Now, Dr. Laurencin, I have a question for you. I'm gonna read a very startling stat for you. I'd like for you to respond. Today, African Americans comprise 13.4% of the US population, yet they receive just 2% of research grants across every STEM field. How do you respond to that?
Well, let me just, I'll do this in two parts. I just want to just do a bit of response in terms of the discussion on mentorship, which I think is of crucial importance. We've just started what is a new field called regenerative engineering, which is a convergence field involving advanced material science, stem cell science, developmental biology, physics, and also clinical translation. And one of our principles is responsibility. Responsibility in science, which is in two areas. One, intellectual responsibility in science, but the other part of the science is also social responsibility in science. So if you go to our website, don't do it now, but if you go to our website, the Regenerative Engineering Society, you'll see in big bold letters it will say, dedicated to the democratization of science. And so it's one of the first societies that's actually, I think, that's there that has as its core value democratizing science. And so we think that the way scientific organizations look right now should not be the way they look. And in fact, we are actually comfortable with it. I mean, people are comfortable going to a meeting and there's only like one black person in the room or one Latino in the room, and it's sort of okay. But it should not be okay. And so our society is really built upon trying to reshape and change the way we think about where science should go. And so we've got about 900 members right now. You can join online. We are now a part of the American Institute of Chemical Engineers. They purchased us, and now we're a community of the American Institute of Chemical Engineers, and we're excited to be on the AICHE webpage. But we have, we're $20 for under 20. So we encourage young people. My concept of young is changing all the time, but really young people, middle school, high school kids, to join our society. It's the first society you'll join. We give them little certificates, their first certificate of a society. And we like to, we're adopting schools in different cities as a part of the society. And we believe that this is from the grassroots area in terms of mentorship, having young people as a part of a society. We have a K-12 newsletter that we have. Our journal is unique in that we have the Regenerative Engineering and Translational Medicine published by Springer Nature. It's unique because it's one of the first journals that were started with lay summaries as a part of the, there's a lay summary of the article that's written for the K-12 level of, not K, maybe 6 to 12 level of, in terms of students. So it becomes very, very important. So in answer to your other question, it is a startling number. It's a startling fact. And it's something that has been, in terms of the low percentage of blacks who have been able to be funded by the federal government, and it's multifactorial. I sat on the advisory committee to the director of NIH when something called the Ginter report first came out that actually demonstrated NIH the very, very low numbers, and it was not surprising that there are a number of different factors. But the important thing to remember is that when one controls for educational background, environment, et cetera, those differences persist and are there, which points to areas of systemic racism that are part of it. What can we do? Well, what I proposed, which didn't go through, was the Laurencin Amendment. And as you know, you get a score. You get a priority score, impact score, in all these different federal agencies. And often, I know this may be hard to believe, Black people have impact scores or priority scores that place them in fundable range, and they don't get funded. Program directors decide not to fund them. So my simple rule was that if there is a Black person or Latino person who has a superior score, then you want to fund a white person with an inferior score, you can fund that person, but you should fund the person with the superior score first, in addition. Simple rule. That was a simple rule that will close the gap in terms of numbers of, in terms of that percentage. And I proposed that to NIH, and it was shot down, so we can't do that. First of all, they said, well, we're not sure if it happened, how often it happens. And I said, well, it doesn't happen often, then it's easy to accept this. It's easy to approve it. But those are sorts of things, and the systemic issues and systemic inequities that are still there that would not allow a system to say tomorrow, okay, yes, if we're going to fund someone who's white and has a low score, that's not in the fundable range, we will fund that person, but we will fund everyone else. If we're trying to increase the numbers and we're trying to look for ways that we should fund Blacks and Latinos in that range. So that's a major area, a major issue that's there. And we've done some work on this. One of the things that came out of the ACD meetings was we have the NIH Build program, which is Building Leadership and Diversity program, which our university is a site for, which we bring, in our case, we bring Latino students to our university for research experiences and mentoring. And those are important because I think the pipeline, we talk about in terms of doing that, but there are things inside the system that we need to do that are lower hanging fruit instead of 15 to 20 year programs that we need to do to make a difference. And I hope the systemic, it's interesting. I think Francis Collins and for the first time about 3 or 4 months ago actually had a statement on systemic racism at NIH and really admitted the fact that that it's there and it persists at NIH and needs to be tackled. So it's good to see that's happening. The last point about this is that we've started really working on this issue from a number of different standpoints, and I chair something called the National Academy's Roundtable on Black Men and Black Women in Science, Engineering, and Medicine. If you do National Academy's Black Men, Black Women, if you look it up, you can see the roundtable. And the roundtable brings together people around, from different constituencies to tackle these issues, such as the low NIH rate and NIH funding rate, such as COVID-19 in the Black community. And these issues all have roots in racism and discrimination as a very major part of it. So I invite you to go to when we're done here, go to the roundtable website, Roundtable of Black Men, Black Women. And we've had about 6 publications so far. We've had one on racism, one on COVID-19, one on the educational pathways. And you can buy the books for $60, or you can get the electronic book, you can get the PDF of the book for free, which is free is better. And so with the National Academies Press, you can download some of the materials that we have. But we are actively tackling these issues, and I am happy to see that last month, NIH became a partner of the Roundtable and is now funding the Roundtable completely, for the next 3 years. The Chan Zuckerberg Foundation is funding the Roundtable. I met with Facebook executives to talk about how if we look at what's going on with COVID-19 in the Black community, how Facebook has contributed to that. They've responded in kind, and now they're partners in terms of the Roundtable. And so we have a mixture of Johnson & Johnson, I'm a consultant for, is a partner of the Roundtable. So we have a mix between foundations, funding agencies, public funding agencies, and also companies. It's a rich mix in terms of being dedicated to these issues.
Excellent, excellent. Well said. Dr. Alcantar, how do we fix this?
Well, I think being aware of the problem is a start. Being aware that having diversity will actually increase profit for most companies. If you have a diverse group that come up with new innovative ideas, they actually hit, the evidence is that they hit a higher market, right? They not just hit one a specific side of the population, but then you can have Latinos, then you can have women of color, you can have white women all together actually liking the product that you're producing because it came from a group that saw the little details that were able to create that product that you're selling to a higher audience. So I think that's the start. And as I mentioned before, companies really had to embrace diversity, inclusion, leadership, innovation, because if they do, they will have higher profit. But also just think about the employees that you have. They will come happy to work with you, to work for you, right? A person who feels inclusive and that feels their ideas they are people in the table, they are listening to it, it's a safe space, they can get feedback from the other part of the teams. Those kind of environments actually produce even higher innovation and entrepreneurship.
Sure.
Given the opportunity to a diverse audience to listen to the ideas, that's also a good thing. So I think having, being a little bit less biased, that will help. Getting, an open door. Like if you have the ability to give money to new ideas, to create that entrepreneurship culture in the country, give it a try, right? It has a company, has a member of the industry and market share, give it a try. The next time you listen to someone that is a woman, is a woman of color, a Black, a Hispanic, try to come to the table with no biases and just listen to their ideas. I think
Listening to their ideas, so important, so critical, to lend a sympathetic ear. Well, you'll be delighted to know, and I'm sure everyone out in the audience knows this, but I'll reiterate it in a moment, that the National Inventors Hall of Fame just recently inducted their first two female inventors, Dr. Marion Croak and Dr. Patricia Bath. And these two amazing women will serve as the exemplars of what we would hope would be a future pattern, right? Because as Dr. Laurencin made note, invention is something that we've been part of for many, many, many years, particularly in the Black invention. Dr. Onesimus, the African-American slave, who in 1716 introduced to the town of Boston and to this country a cure for smallpox. So in the Black Inventors Hall of Fame, we recognize him as the father of modern day vaccines, even though that honor goes to an Englishman by the name of Edward Jenner. Dr. Hsieh, we'd just like to give you a last second. We're down to 2 minutes on our presentation, but are you optimistic on where we're heading with the notion of inclusivity and diversity in the fields of STEM and high tech and innovation?
Yeah, definitely. We definitely think we are on the right track.
Right track.
As in the corporate world, and now is special committee for almost every public traded company has been created. And this is the equity, diversity, and the inclusion. So there is a score as published by the SAEC, measure the companies in the corporate world. How do we bring this diversity, inclusion into the corporations? So I hope by the collaboration between the universities and the corporations and the government, and I think we'll make a change in the next few years. So it is a very, very good sign, and we start to focus on this issue now, and hopefully we'll see the results.
Well, let's hope so. Let us all remain optimistic. Now, I believe that the panel, we're going to stick around and take a few questions from the audience. You can direct them to Dr. Ming Hsieh. You can direct them to any one of us up here on the stage. Sir, introduce yourself. Mm-hmm. Speak up a little louder.
We are really interested in diversity and inclusion, both with the staff and with inventors and patents, all of the perspectives. And we started collecting data on that. So about 20% of our inventors who disclose are female. A third are female. We've polled some of our startup companies, and about a third of our of the leaders, either on the boards or in the executive management, are women or minorities. And we want to get more data to get an idea of where we are before we can figure out where we're going. But we're running into, when we try to collect demographic information, we run into privacy issues. And so what are some best practices for collecting data and still remaining in balance with respect to privacy?
Dr. Laurencin, you want to handle that one?
Your
Best
question
practices for
about data
data?
and privacy?
Collecting data, yes.
Yeah, I think it's important that if you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there. So, I think it's important that that information is brought on and collected in terms of these different areas. And we've sometimes had debates in terms of at high levels in organizations about whether we should be obtaining data or not, or privacy. But most of, just in order to be able to go to a website or to be able to register for a meeting, you're giving your name, background, et cetera, to be able to make it occur, and the stakes are much higher in terms of that. So I think it's very, very important. I want to make sure that we have enough time here, and I just want to take a moment before we do anything else I want to make a small presentation to Mr. Howard. So on behalf of the National Academy of Inventors, our president, Dr. Sandberg, and the board of directors of the National Academy of Inventors, we're honored to make you an honorary member of NAI.
Wow. Wonderful.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. Great.
Thanks to our great panel.
Great.
Absolutely fabulous. Thanks so much.